Hello everyone. It is Jackie with Pocket Preschool, and tonight I am coming to you live, or you're watching the replay. And tonight we're talking all about student sign-in in the morning. So every morning my kiddos come in, and part of their morning routine is to sign in. So their parents sign in, and then they sign in. So I want to know, so tell me in the comments, do you do daily sign-in? Do your kiddos do daily sign-in as part of their morning routine? Do you do it at a different time? Do you not do it? Are you thinking about doing it? Kind of where is everybody at? And if you do sign-in in the morning, tell me how you do it. Do you do it on dry erase boards? Do you have printed, like their names printed out? Do you do it on the art easel? How do you do it? So that way we can get to know each other tonight too. So hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. So like I said, if you're just joining me, so we do daily sign-in every morning as part of their morning routine. So my kiddos' morning routine is come in, they put their things away, they do question of the day, they sign in, and then they do the morning table time activity. So it's just part of their day. And why I love having morning sign-in as part of their day is because it is a guaranteed time where they have to write their name at least once a day. And which it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but we do so many hands-on things in my classroom, and we don't do worksheets really. So they may not write their name during, like, especially that beginning half of the year when we don't really do journal work a lot, like writing journals. We do fine motor journals, but not journals where they write their name at the top every day. So I just love sign in, so they have a time to sign in every morning. So it looks like a lot of you guys are saying you use paper or dry erase. So again, tell me in the comments if you do sign in or not. So in the top of this post, there is a link to my website, and there is free sign-in paper. So this is the sign-in paper that I use, and I actually differentiate it, so I'll show you that in just a minute. But yeah, so make sure you grab, it's free sign-in paper, it's blank. It's also editable, so you can add, where is it? So you can add in their names you can put their names on the sign-in, so that way you don't have to write them every morning. So yeah, so that's at the top of this post. I'm sorry, my allergies are going crazy. I'm just itchy today. So like I said, we sign in every morning, part of our morning routine. So kind of the steps to sign in, because one, some of our kiddos come in. We started on day one. And day one when we started, I just have these blank sign-in papers out, probably for about a week or so, until I get to know my kiddos and kind of where they are developmentally. And if they're scribbling, that's fine. If they're writing one letter, that's fine. Wherever they're at is fine with me. I just kind of want to get to know them, where they're at. And it's an awesome it's an awesome name sample, because the kids learn so quick. And it's a great way to get a name sample those first couple days before they learn anything new, so you have a great kind of baseline. And I put out these pencils with it. I used to use larger pencils, but now I use these golf pencils, and I get them on Amazon, or you can get regular golf pencils. But yeah, golf pencils are great because they can't fist as much with a golf pencil, so they're kind of forced to use their fingers and do a better pencil grasp. You can also put pencil grasp on the pencils if you want, but I like to use pencils because that means they have to push and use appropriate pressure when they use a pencil. Sometimes I put out markers just to kind of mix it up, but typically I use golf pencils for morning sign-in. And like I said, we always start with just a blank sign-in, and I always have to tell parents or whoever drops off, whatever family member or friend drops off in the morning, that it is okay if they're scribbling. It is okay if they're just writing one letter. It does not have to be perfect, so do not write it for them. Do not have them trace it. I want them to develop that confidence and write their name. Because if they're just writing one letter, that's totally fine, because that's where they're at developmentally. So I want them to be confident in doing that. And after about a week, I usually have everyone's signatures kind of figured out. So if they're just making an M, because their name is Mary, I know M is Mary. the circle squiggle, that's, Ross or Rose, or, the B with the 2 circles is Bradley. Whatever it is, I get to know their names or their signatures, so it's no big deal. But it is kind of a teaching moment for families because they kind of freak out when they see that their kiddos have to sign in. But once I kind of tell them, we're just learning and we're just practicing, so it's totally fine wherever they're at. So once they get over that, they're good. So after I get to kind of know where they are, I give each kiddo a different spot on the sign-in. And I know you're thinking, that's a lot, but it's okay. I'll tell you how I do it, and you'll be able to do it too. So some kiddos come in and they don't know, they can't recognize their name yet, right? So what I do is I color code their name. So in my class, everyone is color coded. So like these were my kids from last year. So CJ, everywhere his name was green. Jude, everywhere his name was blue. Josephine, everywhere her name was pink. And I'll tell you about the highlight in a minute, but those kiddos would come in. I have the sign-in sheets, and I have one page, and they're in the same spot every day. And when I taught full day, I had 18 kids, so I had 4 to 5 sign-in sheets out, and I just have them on one table, and they find their name, and then they write their name, and then they go do the table time activity. So CJ would find the name that was green. He knew that was his name because it was green. And if kiddos knew their name, I did not make it colored, so that way the kiddos who didn't know their name could find the right color. And CJ would go, oh, look, there's the green C, that's for CJ, and he would trace it. You can kind of see he traced it in pencil, and then he would go do table time. And then my other friends that recognize their name, they are all typically in yellow those first couple weeks. So they are tracing, so they still have a support, so they're tracing their name, but everybody who can recognize their name's in yellow, and I just use yellow ink, so that way I can print it off each day. If you don't want to use lots of paper, go ahead and stick them in a dry erase pocket, so that way they can trace their name, and then you can erase, and then you don't have to waste a whole bunch of paper every day. So that's kind of how I start my sign in and sign out. I color code the kids who don't know their names yet. And let's say a kiddo is totally just scribbling. So I think I have an example somewhere. Here's one. So this year, and you can totally just write it. You don't even have to type it on the computer. Like Aiden, he couldn't write his name because he was a young 3 when he first came to me in the fall. So he was just tracing his A. And Malia was just tracing her M because that's where she was at, that's where he was at. So they were just tracing the first letter. And then once they got that first letter down, then I added another letter. And so it would be like A-Y. And then he did A-Y-E, and then A-Y-E-D, and then A-Y-E-D-I-N. And then eventually he did his whole name. And then I'll tell you kind of the stages in just a second. So it's totally okay, especially if you have young 3s, or maybe you have 4s and they are totally scribbling still too. Just have them trace that first letter in their name, and then once they get that first letter, then have them trace the first and second letter all the way until they get to the end. Because if they're tracing all of the letters and they can't make any of them, they're gonna get discouraged. They're not gonna be making the letters correctly. And if they practice making the letters incorrectly over and over and over, they develop incorrect motor memory. And motor memory is when your muscles remember how to do something. So when you go to yoga and you do a yoga pose, the second time you do it, it's a little bit easier because your muscles kind of remember the movement. And when you do it the third time, it's a little bit easier because your muscles remember. So if they're practicing a letter over and over and over and it's wrong, their motor memory is going to be wrong, so it's going to take a bazillion more times to relearn the correct way. So I don't know if you ever have, like a B is one that kiddos make incorrectly a lot. They'll make like the line down and then they'll do the circle for a B. A lot of your friends that come in, they write their B's like this, right? And it takes forever for them to relearn how to make their B correctly, like line down, bump, bump, right? It takes forever. Laura says, asked, can you add a picture to their name? You totally can. So I know some people, especially if you have like all threes, like maybe Aiden is a elephant everywhere and Malia has like a flower or something. You can totally add the clip art pictures with their names or stickers, whatever you use. You can totally add that as well. So when Elizabeth said, when I taught full day, did I color code for 18 kids? So I did, except I would have like, I did red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, and teal. So I had 8 colors, so I had like about 3 or 4 of each color sometimes. And sometimes I had up to 25 kids on my roster. So I would have like, you know, 4 kiddos who were the color green. I just tried to make sure when I color coded that all my green friends had different letters that started their name. So I like maybe Colton and Jude and Bradley and I can't think of names right now. Jose and Taryn, they were all green, but all of their names started with different letters. That way, if I had a friend who was just learning their name, they would be like, oh, my name is Colton. I have to find the green name. It has a C at the beginning. So that way they can start to recognize their name, because what they'll do is they'll recognize that first letter in their name first, and then they'll start to recognize the rest. So, hope that helps. All right, so the developmental sequence of how I have them do their name is, so they do, and obviously if they're already doing this, I don't have them go backwards. So if my friend is scribbling, I have them trace their first letter, and then I slowly add on letters until they are tracing their full name. And then after they do their whole name and they trace it, then after that, so I'll kind of use this guy. So let's say Austin traced his name 1 letter at a time, and now he can trace his name and he's successful tracing his name. Then I have his name and he writes it underneath. So he was writing his name with a model. And then after that, he writes his name, first and last name in uppercase with a model. And you can have them trace their last name if they need that help. But sometimes by this point in the year, once they're making their last name, if they can make those letters independently, you don't have to have them trace. And then we switch to lowercase, first name, lowercase independently, and then lowercase last name. And you can see, where is it? So, like on this one, and I have different kiddos at different levels, and it's totally okay if different kids are doing different things. So like Charlie, he could write his name in uppercase fine. So he was ready to do lowercase, so he was tracing his name in lowercase when other friends were doing uppercase. And then he was writing his name independently in lowercase when he was ready. And that's okay to have different kiddos at different levels. So like, for example, here is another one. Where is it? So like here shows kind of four different kids at 3 different levels. So these 2 kiddos are just tracing their name in uppercase, and you can tell they're color coded still, so they probably don't recognize their name. And then these 2 friends are writing their name in uppercase, but with that support. And then let's see if I got another one. So then here's some other kids that are at different levels. So this little guy, these guys are writing their names in uppercase just with the model, and then she has moved on to tracing in lowercase. So it's totally okay to have different kids at different levels. Here's another example. I mean, you can tell, so around, I'll tell you this in just a second. So here, I'll tell you this example, and then I'll say what I was gonna say. So she's writing her name, her first name and last name with a model. She's just doing her first name, and these 2 friends are still tracing, and they're color coding because they still don't recognize their name. So different kids at different levels at different times, and it's totally okay. And then, so what I do is we do this every day, all the time, as their morning routine. And then at the end of the month, what I do is I will put out a blank sign-in sheet, or at the end of every other month. I will put in a blank sign-in sheet and with pencils, and they will have to write their name independently. So that way I can kind of see where they're at independently, and then I change these as needed. So I also look at these at the end of the month and be like, oh, Cassie, she is doing great tracing her name, so I'm ready to bump her to the next level. So now let's have her trace or write her name independently. I think I have these out of order. I do. Hold on. So she's ready. She's doing great tracing, so now she can write her name independently with the model. So I kind of move them along each month. Plus, if you put blank sign-in sheets out at the end of the month, they're also great because if you have to do portfolio or name samples or you want to, I literally keep these blank ones and then I cut them out and I put them in the portfolio. So here's a August, an October, and a January. I don't do every month, but I do about every quarter. So that way you can see their name progression in their portfolio. And all of this too is in that blog post with the free editable name samples. So some people are asking is why do some early childhood professionals like tracing and some don't? I don't know why that is, because tracing is basically just a visual model. I know OTs use tracing a lot. So I use tracing because that's what a lot of OTs use, and that's kind of what the research tells us. And I also do uppercase first, even with my pre-K kiddos. I still teach them uppercase first because kind of like I said at the beginning, I want them to learn how to write their letters correctly. So if they are not writing their name yet, one, they're not ready to do lowercase. If they can't make uppercase yet, they're not ready to do lowercase because lowercase letters are trickier. They have harder lines, harder line combinations than the uppercase. So kiddos make, I don't know where my handout is, but I'll put the developmental sequence on here at the end. So kiddos make the different, they're able to make straight lines before they're able to make curves. And I do what's developmentally appropriate. Do I transition my kiddos when they're ready to lowercase? Yes, I do. Does it take them a while to transition and remember to write their name in lowercase? It does, but you know what? I do what's developmentally appropriate, so we do uppercase first. We switch to lowercase when they're ready, and that way too, when you switch to lowercase when they're ready, one, it's not frustrating. Woohoo, right? So which means they still like writing their name. They still like writing letters because it's not frustrating, because it's something they're able to do. Their muscles are ready to do. Their hands are ready to do. They have all the eye-hand coordination. They have the bilateral integration, which I'll talk about all those things in just a minute, because now it's not frustrating. They're ready. Their bodies are ready. Their minds are ready. All of that is ready, and it's not frustrating because they are able to do it. If you're having a 3-year-old who is scribbling, write lowercase letters, and it's frustrating, they're not going to want to do it, which means you could also have behavior problems, and they're going to think negatively about writing their name. So they're not going to want to do it. They're not going to do it independently and during pretend play. They're not going to do it independently in the writing center. And we want them to have confidence writing their name. We want them to write their name during play. We want them to write their name when they're making letters for their mom or their dad or their friends or in their journals. Because all of those independent practices add up to a huge amount of practice. And if they're not doing it because they're frustrated or they don't like to write their name or they think it's too hard, you're losing all of those great opportunities during play. So that's why I do uppercase first. And if you don't do sign in, you could totally start it Monday. You can totally start it tomorrow. It's totally okay to start new things and try new things, even though it's not the beginning of the year or it's not January. I think sometimes as teachers we're like, oh, I'll try that next year. Why? Why wait? Try it with your kiddos this year. It's never too late to try something new or to add something new to your routine. If you think your kiddos are able to do it, totally try it. So I want to tell you some other things that kiddos need in order to write their name. So they also need a strong core. So wherever your sign-in is, I know some people do it at the easel, which is right over here. So if you don't have a table in the morning, put your sign-in sheet at your art easel. Do you have to use these sign-in sheets? You do not. You can also put it on like a big poster sheet, laminate it, and then you can just erase it every day. That way you're not having to do that over and over and over. And the trick is to lamination. So if you laminate a sheet of paper, you can write their names in permanent marker, so permanent yellow marker, and they can trace. And then if they're ready to move the next level, how you erase on plastic is color the permanent marker with a dry erase marker and then erase, and the permanent marker disappears. So then you can put the next level on with the permanent marker, and you don't have to keep remaking and relaminating sign-in sheets if you're doing it at the easel. And if you're doing it at the easel, you're also helping them develop those strong shoulder and upper arm, which is, they need that in order to write. When they're doing sign-in, they have to cross the midline to write because you want them to start over here, which is another great reason to trace. We want them to start on the right side of the paper and go over. So learning that left to right progression. Yeah. Excuse me, allergies. And then they're using the pencil grasp, so you can use little pencils. Or if you're using dry erase, you can use skinny dry erase. Those are great too. That's totally fine. Another thing you're working on is hand dominance, because you're putting a writing tool in their hand. Oh, Alicia says she uses dry erase crayons. So that's another fun thing you can do. You're also working on bilateral integration. That's when the two hands are doing the same thing for one task. So they're holding onto the paper while they're writing their name. Kind of like when they hold their paper and they cut with scissors, their two hands are working together to do the same thing, which is making both their sides of their brain work at the same time. So they have to hold the paper while they write their name. Otherwise, the paper is doing this, right? It's like wiggling all over, and which makes it hard. So say you have to hold the paper with your hand and write their name. So you're also working on all the handwriting skills. So another way you can sign in, if you don't want to do the easel or if you don't want to do paper pencil, you can also just do, and sometimes, like I'm doing this right now just to kind of mix it up. I am just putting out a cup with their names on it. And I actually have these names spread out on the table. One side is uppercase, one side is lowercase. And I put the side up that that kiddo is working on. And then I put out blank dry erase boards and they write their name. So you can totally tell that my little friend here put her name card down and wrote her name. And she ran out of room, and so the A ended up over here. I love that. And you can also still use dry erase boards for an assessment. You can either take a picture of it or just put this on the copier and copy it, and then you have a name sample that way. So you can totally tell that Beckham used his name card, because there's a space there, to write his name. And he had it right there. You can totally tell because there was a space. So I have these name cards out for friends who need them. And I don't have them. And then my friends who don't need the model, they don't have to use them. So a dry erase board is just out with a little bucket. And then these name cards are a freebie. And they're editable in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. So Laura asked, I have a child who swaps hands and writes the same with both hands. Is this normal? So yes, that is totally normal. So what they just probably don't have a hand dominance yet. So what you want to do is you want to have them face you and give them a pencil or give them a writing tool right at their midline. And whatever hand they grab that pencil with, 9 out of 10 times, that is their dominant hand. So if you give them a pencil, but you have to make sure you're giving it to them straight on, straight at their midline, whatever hand they naturally grab that pencil with is their dominant hand. Like I said, 9 out of 10 times. So just keep giving them writing tools, and eventually they won't switch. And sometimes, a lot of times when kiddos switch too, even though they have a dominant hand, they will start with their dominant hand, but guess what happens? Their dominant hand gets tired because their fine motor muscles are weak or they're just not as developed yet, so that's when they switch. So if your kiddo is switching hands, one, give them the pencil at the midline and see what hand they grab it with, and then two, just observe and kind of write down. And you can also write it in the corner of their board, like maybe this, like you can just put like a R after they sign in. Oh, she started with her right hand. And then make note of it all week and then see what hand they start with. Because sometimes when they're switching hands, it's because their dominant hand gets tired, so they go and they switch to their non-dominant hand because their hand is tired. Or they don't have a dominant hand yet. So they're switching for one of two reasons. All right. Okay, so sign in paper, sign in using dry erase, which you can tell we were doing that. To save paper, you can sign in using a dry erase boards. Let's see. Oh, so some other things we use sign in for are when, especially we're using these a lot right now because we have to do indoor recess a lot. But if you have something, or if you have a center or an activity that is really popular, what you can do is put a sign-in sheet out, and they have to write their name, and you can totally put, because I have some of these that are on a ring, so you can put these name cards out that are on a ring, so that way they have them there for support, but put the sign-in sheet out, and they can sign up to do the activity, and then use a stand timer, or right now we use our Alexa to set the timer, and when the timer is up, I go down and I see who's next on the list. Works great for two reasons. One, it's great for turn taking. Two, it's another way to get them to write their names. So, or if you don't want to use a sign-in sheet, just use plain paper and they can write their name down. It's another great way to sign in. So, all right. So, one thing I will say, so while I have my kids signing in each morning, I am also observing what letters they're struggling with. I'm observing what letters they're not making correctly, and then I use that data, and I do that for a fine motor journal activity, or I'll do it as a small group. So let's say I notice Cassie is making her eye. Have you ever seen kiddos make eyes like this? Let's say Cassie is making her eye like this. Have you ever seen kiddos do that? Guess what they're not doing? They are not crossing the midline. So what I do is I say, oh, I just put it in my notes. Cassie needs help making her eye. So then what I do is for our fine motor journals or for small group, we will practice making eyes or making Q's or making whatever letter that those kiddos need to practice. Let me find an example. Because I had a friend this year who was struggling making an eye, and we did it in our fine motor journals, and I can't find it now, I'm sure. Okay, here's an example. So we did E. So I noticed a kiddo who was struggling, and sometimes it's one kiddo I notice is struggling making a letter, or maybe I notice two kiddos. So if I notice a bunch of kiddos who are struggling with a letter, we'll obviously work on that one first, and we'll do it as a table time activity. Or if I notice a kiddo is struggling with one letter, I may pull them and do just some one-on-one with them as well. So we made a tree, and I do have a whole, Facebook Live on my fine motor journals, and my fine motor journal pack is in my TPT store. If you want to check that out, I don't have the blog post yet. It's coming eventually. My life is really crazy right now. So it's coming, I promise. But we made trees, and we made a long line, and then we made little branches going out because the branches look like the letter E. So we talked about making a long line and then touching the line and going out and going out. And then after we made our trees, we came over here to the other side, and I made an E in the corner. I modeled it, and then they made their E's on this side. So that's kind of how I use their sign-in sheets and I notice and observe what letters they're struggling with, and I do a mini lesson on that in their fine motor journals, or we do shaving cream and I help them with that letter. So that's kind of how I get my kiddos to make their letters correctly. I notice, I observe, I make notes on what they need help with, and then I do lessons and activities to support that. And, oh, my link for my past Facebook Live, somebody was asking. So if you need help with fine motor journals or want to know what they are, the link's at the top of this post. Yeah. So yeah. All right, what else? Do you guys have any questions for me? So go ahead and put them in the comments. I know some people, instead of doing a morning sign-in, they do a name activities. So they might build their names. My friend Jamie from Play to Learn Preschool, she doesn't do a morning sign-in. She does a morning name game or a morning name activity. So that works too. Sometimes it's tracing, sometimes it's building names. But I personally just do a morning sign-in. So this is a warning. So when I'll say this because I loved my kiddos' preschool teacher, but the one thing that drove me crazy was in the morning, all the kiddos signed in, which is great. I love morning name sign-in, so I was pumped she did it. But each kiddo had their own page in a binder, so you had to wait in line while each kid signed in a binder in the morning. And if you have ever watched little learners sign in, some of them take a few minutes to write their name. So that's why I have multiple kids on a page and I have a whole table of sign in. So that way they're not waiting a long time for somebody else to sign in. And two, if I notice two kids are always coming in at the same time, I will put them on two different sign in pages. So I will make sure they're not on the same page so they're not having to wait. So if you do sign in, make sure you do multiple pages or make it so there is some way so kiddos can sign in. A lot of them can sign in at the same time because otherwise you're going to have kiddos wait. And when kiddos wait, it sometimes does not set your morning up for success because when kiddos wait, sometimes they have behavior problems or they can argue with mom and dad or mom and dad get frustrated because they have to wait. I was fine with it, but sometimes the kiddos get squirrely while they're waiting. Like sometimes we waited for about 15 minutes for the kiddos to sign in the morning. So just a warning, make sure whatever way you sign in, make sure multiple kiddos can do it at the same time so that way there's not a giant amount of wait time. So like I said, our morning routine is put their stuff in their cubby, answer the question of the day, sign in, and it's literally at the table in my art center, and then they go do the morning table time activity. So Christina is asking, how would I start a morning sign-in with my students if it's the middle of the school year? So what I would do is, like if you want to start this maybe next week with your kiddos and it's not part of your morning routine, I would just say, I wouldn't like randomly start it in the morning. I wouldn't like just make it part of your morning routine. What I would do is say, I have hiccups. I would have a class meeting about it and say something like, oh my gosh, you guys are just so smart and you guys have our morning routine down pat. I want to make it trickier and I want to give you guys more fun things to do in the morning. So we're going to change our morning routine. So now our morning routine, we're going to sign in every morning before we do the table time activity. So let's practice that today. So, and I would just have them practice and I would like literally have all the kids sit by the door and a couple at a time, have them go do the morning routine. If you do like a morning table time activity, set that up. And so like 4 kids at a time do the morning routine with you. And once they get kind of through part of the morning routine, have the next group start. That way they know change is coming. So you give you tell them the new routine and probably use a visual support. I have a visual morning routine cards that I use. Let me go grab it. Hold on one second. Hold on, I'm coming back, I promise. Promise. have this visual support, and this is in my TPT store. It's in the rainbow and in black and white, but it is our arrival routine. So I would say this is our new morning routine. I would tell them the steps. I would tell them why, because they're so smart. They are just ready to do so many smart things. And and then I would model it. So I would do it real quick, and then I would have them practice it. That way then next morning when they come in, they have one, they know the change is coming. 2, they've already practiced it. And 3, you have a visual support and you are ready with that visual. So like sometimes I have this on a magnet. These are like little magnet clips from Learning Resources from Amazon, but I have it on a magnet because sometimes, especially at the beginning of the year, I literally pull it off. And sometimes if they're forgetting to do the table time activity after sign-in, I will literally put this on the table. Or maybe they're forgetting to do this, the sign-in after question of the day. So I will put this on the question of the day chart. So that way, or I sometimes can carry it around. It's also on Velcro. So I can peel it off. These are just little Velcro. This is just a ribbon. Super fancy. Super, super fancy. So yeah. Alrighty. So Anne is asking, would I do this with a kiddo if I have 17 kids and they all ride the bus? I would try it, see how it goes, and maybe just have, like if you have a table of 6, you can also do this on the floor. So put clipboards somewhere, like maybe whatever place you don't use in the morning, put clipboards on the floor, like 6 of them, or you could even start out with like however many you think it would work for your classroom. Put them on the floor somewhere and they can sit on the floor and they can sign their name in. So even if you don't have a table, because if you have everybody coming in at once, you're gonna need multiple spots for them, so they're not waiting a long time. So you can do it, just put them on clipboards on the floor. So yeah, and then I would just practice it maybe 1 or 2 times during the school year. All right, so I think those are all the questions. If you have any other questions, or even better, if you want to post the way you do your sign-in over in the Pocket of Preschool Facebook group, that would be awesome, because all of us over there love seeing all of the ways that you guys do stuff in your classroom. So go to your school tomorrow, or once you implement this, or if you're already doing it, take a picture and post it in the Pocket of Preschool Facebook group so we can all see it, because we all learn so much more from each other than anything else, right? Because you're like, ooh, that's not working in my classroom, but ooh, I think I could do that. That will work really, really well in my classroom. And as we all know, especially teachers, we're all very visual, right? So just having a picture of how it works in your classroom always helps us too. Alrighty. All right, so I think those are all the questions. Again, at the top of this post, I have a blog post with the free sign-in sheets, and they're editable. So, and I literally just like make the fonts different colors. When they're tracing, I just make them yellow font, yellow ink. So yeah, and if you don't get a lot of paper, plop them in a dry erase pocket. And if you don't want to type them, write them in marker like I have been doing this year. So yes. All right, well, you guys have an awesome night, and I will see you guys next week, 7 p.m. Central Time, and have an awesome night.